cold sliding down your throat on a summer afternoon, that perfect sweetness melting on your tongue, the kind of thing that makes you close your eyes for just a second. Ice cream feels like childhood, like reward, like simple pleasure. It feels innocent. But for most of human history, every single scoop required something invisible and brutal. Before machines, before freezers, before chemistry, ice cream demanded a resource more precious than gold in some places. Winter itself, captured and stored. And the people who made that possible, they didn't get to taste it. What did it really take to bring frozen sweetness to a king's table? This video is about the hidden history behind ice cream, the workers who risked their lives harvesting ice in freezing lakes, the enslaved people who grew the sugar, the dangerous chemicals that replaced human labor, and the fragile system that delivers it to your freezer today. How did something so simple become so complicated? When winter was wealth. Around 4,000 years ago, in the mountains of ancient China, workers climbed steep slopes in the dead of winter. They carried saws, ropes, and wooden sleds. Their job was simple but dangerous. Cut blocks of ice from frozen rivers, drag them down the mountain, and store them in deep pits lined with straw. The ice was not for them. It was for the emperor. The Chinese court mixed this precious ice with honey and fruit pulp. The result was a frozen paste, something close to what we would call sorbet today. Only the wealthiest families could afford it. Ice was currency. It melted. It required constant labor to replace. A single block of ice carried down from the mountains by a team of men might last only days in the summer heat. The moment it arrived, the countdown began. In Persia, around the same time, rulers built massive underground chambers called yakhchals to store ice and snow brought down from the mountains. These structures could keep ice frozen even through scorching summers. The technology was brilliant. Thick mud brick walls, deep shafts, wind towers to pull cool air down into the chambers. But the labor was brutal. Workers hauled ice and snow for miles, often through desert terrain, knowing they would never taste what they carried. In ancient Rome, the Emperor Nero sent runners to the Apennine Mountains to fetch snow. They mixed it with fruit juices and honey for his banquets. The runners worked in shifts, racing against the sun. If the snow melted before they returned, they faced punishment. Some were whipped. Some were reassigned to worse duties. Frozen desserts were a display of power, a reminder that the emperor could command nature itself. But here's the key. None of these early frozen treats were what we call ice cream today. They were ice or snow, flavored and sweetened. The breakthrough that created real ice cream, the kind with milk, cream, and a smooth frozen texture, required something even rarer than ice. It required salt, sugar, and an understanding of freezing point depression. And it required people willing to do the hardest, coldest, most dangerous work for nothing. The ice houses of kings. By the 16th century, European royalty had become obsessed with frozen desserts. Italian chefs in the courts of Florence and Naples perfected recipes using cream and milk, not just fruit and ice. But the challenge remained. How do you keep something frozen when there are no freezers? The answer was ice houses. These were massive stone structures, built half underground, insulated with layers of straw, sawdust, and sometimes animal hides. Workers filled them with ice harvested from frozen lakes and rivers in the winter. A well-built ice house could keep ice solid for months, even through the heat of summer. But only kings, dukes, and the very wealthiest merchants could afford them. Ice houses were symbols of status. If you had one, you had power. In 1791, a man named Thomas Jefferson brought the concept to America. He built an ice house at Monticello and served ice cream to his guests. It was a sensation. But where did the ice come from? And who harvested it? In the early 1800s, a Boston businessman named Frederick Tudor changed everything. He realized that the frozen lakes of New England were a gold mine. He began cutting massive blocks of ice, packing them in sawdust, and shipping them to the southern United States, the Caribbean, and even India. Tudor's ice trade employed thousands of workers. They sawed through thick ice in sub-zero temperatures, often working barefoot on frozen lakes to avoid slipping. Accidents were common. Men fell through the ice and drowned. Others lost fingers and toes to frostbite. Tudor became a millionaire. The workers remained poor. By 1840, Tudor was shipping over 12,000 tons of ice per year. His profits soared. The men who cut the ice earned pennies per block. By the mid-1800s, ice was a commodity. It was bought, sold, and traded like grain or cotton. And ice cream, once a dessert for emperors, began to spread. But it still required one thing: human labor in the coldest, most punishing conditions imaginable. The harvesters. Nobody remembers. Let's talk about the people who made ice cream possible, not the chefs, not the inventors, the ones who actually did the work. In the 1800s, ice harvesting was one of the most dangerous jobs in America. Workers used massive saws to cut blocks of ice weighing over 100 pounds each. They worked on frozen lakes in Massachusetts, Maine, and New York, often in temperatures well below zero. The ice was slippery. The saws were sharp. Accidents were constant. Men slipped, fell through weak spots in the ice, and drowned in freezing water. There were no safety regulations, no insurance. If you died on the job, your family got nothing. The work was relentless. A crew of 20 men could cut and haul 500 blocks of ice in a single day. Each block had to be measured, sawed, lifted, and loaded onto sleds or wagons. The men worked from dawn until the ice became too soft to cut. In some winters, they worked 7 days a week. The pay was low. The conditions were inhuman. But the ice was only half the story. Ice cream also required sugar. Lots of it. And sugar, in the 1800s, was grown on plantations in the Caribbean and the American South using enslaved labor. Men, women, and children worked in brutal heat, cutting sugar cane with machetes, boiling it down into molasses and crystallized sugar. The conditions were horrific. Injuries were common. Death was frequent. So here's the reality. Every scoop of ice cream in the 19th century was made possible by two kinds of extreme labor: freezing cold in the north, burning heat in the south. The people who harvested the ice never tasted the cream. The people who grew the sugar never saw the frozen dessert. They were invisible. Even as ice cream became more popular, as ice cream parlors opened in cities across America and Europe, the supply chain remained brutal. Ice was still cut by hand, sugar was still grown by forced labor, and dairy, the cream, the milk, came from farms where workers lived in poverty, milking cows by hand before dawn, 7 days a week. The dessert felt innocent. The system behind it was anything but. The chemical revolution. Everything changed in 1851. A man named Jacob Perkins invented the first mechanical refrigeration system. It used compressed ether to create cold air. It was loud, dangerous, and prone to leaks, but it worked. For the first time in history, you could make ice without winter. Within decades, refrigeration technology improved. engineers discovered that certain chemicals, ammonia, sulfur dioxide, and later a substance called freon, could absorb heat and create intense cold. Factories began producing ice mechanically. No more ice houses, no more lake harvesting. Ice became cheap, abundant, and industrial, but the new system came with new risks. Ammonia is toxic. A leak in a refrigeration plant could kill everyone in the building. In 1933, a refrigeration system in a hospital in Cleveland, Ohio, malfunctioned. Toxic gas flooded the building. Over 100 people were exposed. Several died. Similar accidents happened in factories, warehouses, and food plants across the world. Then came freon, a so-called miracle chemical developed in the 1920s. It was safer than ammonia, odorless, non-toxic, or so they thought. Decades later, scientists discovered that freon was destroying the ozone layer, the thin shield that protects the Earth from ultraviolet radiation. The chemical industry had known about the risks for years, but lobbied governments to keep using it. By the time freon was banned in the 1990s, billions of pounds had already been released into the atmosphere. Meanwhile, ice cream itself was changing. Industrial manufacturers discovered they could make it cheaper by adding stabilizers, emulsifiers, artificial flavors, and synthetic colors. Ingredients like carrageenan, guar gum, and polysorbate 80 became standard. These chemicals made ice cream smoother, prevented ice crystals, and allowed it to sit on a shelf longer. They also made it possible to produce ice cream on a massive scale and sell it for almost nothing. The cold revolution made ice cream a product anyone could afford, but it also made it a chemical experiment. The cold chain we never see. Today, ice cream is everywhere. Gas stations, grocery stores, vending machines. You can buy it at midnight in the middle of nowhere. But that convenience hides a system more fragile and more controlled than most people realize. Every pint of ice cream you eat today depends on something called the cold chain. This is the unbroken line of refrigeration from the factory to your freezer. The ice cream is made in massive industrial plants, often owned by just a few global corporations. Unilever, Nestlé, General Mills. These companies control roughly 70% of the world's ice cream supply. The mixture is pasteurized, homogenized, and pumped full of air to increase volume. Then it's frozen to around -20 degrees Fahrenheit and loaded into refrigerated trucks. Those trucks drive to distribution centers where the ice cream is stored in giant freezers. From there, it goes to stores, gas stations, and restaurants, all of which must keep it frozen at all times. If the power goes out, if a truck breaks down, if a freezer fails, the product melts. It becomes worthless. This system works because we have reliable electricity, robust infrastructure, and a network of refrigeration that spans the entire planet. But it's also incredibly vulnerable. In 2021, a winter storm in Texas knocked out power for millions of people. Grocery stores lost their entire frozen inventory. Ice cream melted in the aisles. The cold chain broke, and the system collapsed. And then there's what's actually in the ice cream. Most commercial brands today contain little to no real cream. Instead, they use milk powder, vegetable oils, corn syrup, and a cocktail of stabilizers and emulsifiers. These ingredients are cheaper, more stable, and easier to ship, but they're also heavily processed. The ice cream you buy today is often closer to frozen chemical foam than the cream and sugar desserts of the past. The emperors of ancient China sent workers into mountains for ice. We just walk to a freezer. But the system that delivers it, the corporations, the chemicals, the fragile cold chain we never see, is still built on control, convenience, and a supply line one power outage away from collapse. Ice cream started as frozen snow for emperors and became a mass-produced industrial product. The workers who cut ice from frozen lakes disappeared. The enslaved laborers who grew the sugar are gone. But the structure persists, a global supply chain controlled by a few corporations, dependent on chemicals and refrigeration, invisible until it breaks. The dessert hasn't changed. The system has just gotten better at hiding itself. Putting something like this together takes a ridiculous amount of digging through old records and patents and history nobody talks about anymore. If it changed how you see that pint in your freezer, hit the like button. It genuinely helps keep this kind of thing going.